Welcome to the Power of the Purse podcast, the only show connecting women professionals to their peers. This isn't just about money. This is about life. And now the host of the Power of the Purse podcast, Lynn S. Evans.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynn S. Evans, and I am the host of Power of the Purse podcast. There was a time in my life, not too long ago, when I believed three things about money. One, women are not supposed to talk about or be included in any conversations about money. Two, women don't have the natural ability to understand anything about money. And three, men know best how to manage money. And those truths I made up about money guided me for years until I realized money was not a foreign language or some other obscure academic exercise. And it was something I could not only understand, but teach to other women. Too many times I've heard stories from women who ought to know better but didn't until they were forced to because of divorce, widowhood, job loss, or the approach of retirement. This podcast will add another chapter to an ongoing informative conversation about financial topics women should be more knowledgeable about. My mission is to help women reduce their financial illiteracy and develop a healthy relationship with money. With that in mind, my guest today is Wendi Burkhardt. Wendi is the CEO of Silvernest. She's responsible for driving the company's overall direction and strategic growth, as well as overseeing day-to-day operations. She boasts more than 25 years of technology experience working with venture startups, emerging technology companies, rapid growth tech firms, and Fortune 500 corporations. Her history also includes working with Home Instead, a $1 billion in-home senior care corporation. She's a seasoned entrepreneur as well as a mentor and a coach to social ventures. Welcome, Wendi.
Well, thank you for having me today, Lynn. I'm excited to be here and join the conversation with you.
Yeah, it'll be a good conversation because I think, as we said before we started recording, this concept to me is something that is so needed and so appropriate for somebody to put all the pieces together and make a business out of it, and not just make a business, but make it something that serves a social purpose as well. So let's talk about how you did that. I know that somewhere along the line, something occurred in your life that made you think, wow, there's something I might be able to do about this. What was that defining moment?
Well, I always say the best ideas are born out of personal experience. And for me, it was sort of indirectly, without intention, it was the loss of my father. So my parents had met in high school and been together for 50 years. And 4 years ago, my father passed away very suddenly, leaving my mother independent and strong and, financially in a good place, but she had never lived on her own before. And the interesting part of the story is that my husband and I don't have children. And so for years and years, we've talked about, well, gosh, what are we going to do when we get older? And how do we want to live when we get older? And one of the normal conversations is, well, gosh, we just want to go buy a house and live with a bunch of friends. And wouldn't that be really fun? And that's ironically what my mother did right after my father passed away. A very dear friend of hers who actually needed an affordable housing solution moved in with my mom, and it was a huge success. And that really, so that was going on, and it wasn't until about 9 months later that Silvernest was born, actually for different reasons, but I was able to relate to the concept of Silvernest because of that personal experience with my mom.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you put it all together and say, this is a business?
Well, I actually had a great co-founder, which I highly recommend to anyone who's setting out on a new venture. My dear friend Chuck McKinney, who is based here in Denver, was a baby boomer, and he and his wife had been in the aging real estate market for a while. So they had been developing unique group homes where they were actually going into existing neighborhoods and purchasing a home that could accommodate 6 to 7 individuals who were in advanced stages of aging. And the idea behind it was, by, first of all, bringing folks together in a shared care situation, you could create a more affordable solution, but more importantly, you could also allow individuals to stay in the communities that they've been in for quite some time. And Chuck had really recognized that we had this excess surplus of homes and bedrooms in the country right now, particularly with the baby boomers getting a little bit older and their children moving on. He said, we've got all these excess bedrooms and we really should be using them. And they were employing that idea in the model that they were designing, but he recognized that there's a whole stage before you need to move into care where a lot of people are looking for opportunities to either make more money or be connected to other folks and redesign community. And so really, he said, I think that we could figure out how to put people together and help them use their home as an asset in retirement. And that's really how the idea was born.
That's a great idea. I mean, I think it's wonderful that that was developed from obviously what was a very important need for other people. But that raises lots of questions in my mind. And I think of earlier today, I was with some of my college friends who were talking about getting a house together for a vacation. And there were four of us, and we were all people that obviously baby boomer women who had experience living with other people, whether it was spouses or whomever. And every person said, I don't mind renting that house together, but I want to make sure that I have my own bedroom and bathroom. Mm-hmm. It's just funny that, as people said, as we age, we get into our own set ways of how we do things. What time we go to bed, what the routine is before we get to bed, after we go to bed, what do we do? Some people do crossword puzzles, some people read, whatever. But it's just that I wonder, when I think of that, how do you manage to get people together that are, simpatico with each other and not creating chaos? So is there a process you go through to screen people for this?
Absolutely. Well, the funny thing is what I say to people a lot is the idea of sharing a space with somebody that you don't know is not foreign at all when you're younger, right? Most of us have had that experience in some capacity. So many people have had the opportunity to have had a roommate, good and bad.
Yep.
And, we have those experiences. And then, as we move through our life, we tend to live with other people and we live in community. And then somehow or another, as we started living longer, we moved into a situation where many of us started to live alone. And so I often question, how in the heck did that happen? And, the argument that I often hear is, well, gosh, when you're older, you're just so much more picky and you're really particular about things. And I don't know about you, but when I was in my 20s, I was just as picky about things then as I am now.
But, I agree. I agree.
And we realized that, I always say we designed this for my mother. As we designed this and we thought about bringing people together, I designed it for her. And selfishly, I designed it for me. The idea of, well, gosh, if I was going to open up my house and have somebody move in that wasn't my husband or my dog, how would we make sure that we've covered sort of the big items that people would be the most concerned about? And so we have a platform. Silvernest is a platform that actually operates a little bit like a dating site without the dating part of it. So we have both parties input their preferences and tell our platform exactly what they're looking for, both in the type of home that they want to live in, as well as the type of space they have available, and then the type of person that they would feel most comfortable sharing a space with. And then we let our algorithms do the work and identify who would be a good match. So, then if you had a room for rent on the system, you may have, 5 or 6 applicants that are interested in your room. All of your personal information is kept confidential. You publish your listing through the site. Folks can see the property and apply to the property. And our system then will tell you, Lynn, hey, Lynn, here's 5 or 6 people that are interested. Here's the profile of what they look like. And by the way, this is how they've matched you. They're either an 83% match to what you're looking for, or they're 100% match. And then the system will also tell you why they're not a match, so that you can review that and then decide if you want to engage in a dialogue with those individuals.
And then if you say, yes, I'm interested in I only have one bedroom, but I am interested in 3 people, then what do you do? Is that on me then, as the owner of the property, to get in touch with them?
That's right. So we do not share any of your contact information.
Okay.
And the contact initiates only when you're ready. So if you see 3 applicants and you think, I'm really interested in all 3, maybe one more than the others, you can begin communication through the platform with those individuals. We do have a 5-point background check that's built in that you can request on individuals. So full criminal, full misdemeanor. We also do a 5-year eviction history on those folks. So you can request additional data on those individuals as you're going through your conversation process. And, we have all of the communication kept within the platform, and that's largely done for security so that we can monitor individuals and make sure that, there's no one that's trying to have odd or weird conversations. But yeah, then you're allowed to obviously further the conversation, do further vetting. We encourage folks to have your friends and family participate in your decisioning process as you're comfortable doing that. And then once you've made a decision and you've decided that the individual is going to be the right individual, and that may just, some people are comfortable doing that just on the phone. Some people like to meet for coffee. It's really what makes you the most comfortable. Our hope is that by the time that you've decided to have an engagement with someone, we've delivered a qualified and vetted individual. You can take the next steps and do the further vetting. And then once you're ready, we provide a whole suite of tools on the back end to make this experience seamless and easy. So in addition to the background screen, we have an option for you to establish a home sharing agreement, stay compliant. You can fill out the terms of your relationship and store both of those online in the platform. And then if you select, you can also set up automatic rent payments so that you don't have to go ask somebody for their checks every month.
That's good. I was just going to ask that piece of it. Who's responsible for collecting the rent, so to speak? Because that could be real sticky.
That's right. Well, if you don't know somebody, it can get a little awkward.
Yeah, exactly. And, then you have the issue of, what do I do? Do I kick them out or all that ugliness? So how do you protect people from that? What about liability insurance? Is there anything that someone has to have or they get in order to make this work?
Yeah, so we recommend that the homeowners require a renter's insurance policy for whomever is moving in. That's best protection that you can have. We also recommend that the homeowners check with their homeowner's policy to see what would be covered or not covered under their policies. There's quite a few options now for actually extending your homeowner's policy to include coverage for these types of situations, and it typically is pretty low cost. So you can usually have an add-on to your existing policy that's maybe an additional $100 a year to ensure that you're covered. So we recommend that those parties be covered because that gives you the greatest coverage, in the event of. So that's one of the things that we strongly suggest.
Okay, another question that just occurred to me because I'm thinking of in my own community recently. There's been a rash of lawsuits saying that the zoning isn't correct or these people are actually in business and should be paying taxes to the city where these homes are being rented. Have you run into that, and how do you get past that?
Well, so there's a big difference between whether or not you're renting out your home for short-term rental or whether you are occupying your home for the long term and inviting someone to come in as a roommate. Very different. And so the regulation is very different. In most cities, you are allowed to cohabitate with someone, an unrelated party of your choice. And typically, in most cities, you can accommodate up to 3 or 4 individuals in a particular home. The key there is that we do not allow someone on our site to come on and just simply rent a property out. They have to occupy the property. They have to actually be living in the property with the other person. And so that really is a big part of the difference. And we are also built on a platform that assumes that we're trying to prepare people for a longer-term living situation, not a short-term stay. So,
Yeah, that's
our average match or pairing on our site is usually about 6 months at a minimum, and they go longer than that versus just several days or a week.
Now, when you're looking for matches and you're looking at the possibility of people occupying someone else's home, do you have to look for things like, I can't think of the term, where it's handicap ready, so that if people need chair lifts or things like that, that you would provide that, or is that something that you can choose not to have in your match?
So we do provide that. We don't provide the service per se, but what we do, we ask questions about the home being adequately established for disabilities, and we allow the homeowner to disclose if the home has stairs, as an example, or does it have a ramp. And so we try to ask questions. So the best way to think about it is when we're asking the homeowner as they set up their profile, we ask them really 3 buckets of questions. We ask them to tell us a little bit about themselves. We ask them to tell us about the home, and then that becomes a public listing. And then we ask them to tell us about the type of person that they're looking for. So we do try to get a pretty good understanding of the home, how it's set up. Does it have a separate entrance? Are there stairs? What are the shared spaces? So we do inquire about all those items.
Okay, and one of the things I want to make sure everybody knows is that you've had numerous accolades for not just the idea, but the company itself, Silvernest. It was named one of the best entrepreneurial companies in America by Entrepreneur magazine. And you had, obviously, some background in seed funding for something like this. Can you tell me, how did you go about designing the business plan for this, and how long did it take before you got the seed money that you were looking for?
Oh, so great questions. Well, so we really started to discuss the idea and the concept, and really rather than having a significant plan, what we did was go out and research the market. And I would say we spent a good, 2 months really researching the market. We started to do some informal sort of market surveys to just understand whether or not people would be interested in something like this. We took out a small ad in the paper. This was even before we had the concept built. So it was about, because the concept was really unique and nothing like this existed, it was hard to tell whether or not this would be something that people would be interested in. And so we really spent a lot of our energy up front trying to ask those questions and get enough information to sometimes be dangerous and decide that we felt like we wanted to move forward. So we bootstrapped the business ourselves. My early co-founder and I were 50-50 partners. And when we built the company, and we both bootstrapped the company and invested our own personal money to get the business off the ground. And we used that capital really to operationalize and run the company for the first year. That allowed us to do the research, begin development, get the first prototype of the concept out the door, and start getting some initial traction. And then we started to raise some seed funding. And so we really started raising seed money about a year after we had originally established the company, and spent probably about 3 months raising the first part of our seed. We raised an extended seed thereafter that took us about another 3 months. So about 6 months in total raising seed funding over the course of about 15 months after we had originally, established the business.
That's pretty good. 16 months is pretty good. I was going to say 2 years, 3 years, something like that, but that's exceptionally great. Well, I think it's just such a great idea that I can see where a lot of people would be interested. I expect to see you on Shark Tank next week.
Well, we were recruited to Shark Tank, believe it or not. So that was a fun honor. We were actually recruited. We actually respectfully and gracefully declined. I think Shark Tank is a fabulous venue for people if you have a physical product.
Yeah.
It was a little bit more unique to have a service-based business on there. So but it was really exciting for a minute to think about.
Well, it's great. I mean, it's just, it's wonderful for your head just to have that knowledge.
Sure.
And your head doesn't have to get so big it can't fit through the door anymore. But I think that, no, all that stuff is really good. I think it's wonderful to see that you actually took it from an idea, you bootstrapped it for the first whatever year, and then went out and sought the funding because you could see the bigger picture. I mean, most people who do some of these things do them on a local basis and see them as something that's a lifestyle business. But I think the fact that you had the vision to see this as a national company, and God knows it could be international. But I think that when I look at on your website that you started essentially in Colorado, but you have some, at least at the time the website was done, you had some plans for New York and Miami, I think, and some other places. So what is the long-term expectations of the business, the growth? All major cities?
Well, we are currently available everywhere in the country. So the product since we started was live 100% in all 50 states, in all cities around the country. But we, in the early days with, the initial seed money, we really used that money to try to market test and determine how to talk to our customers, where to find them. And so we really concentrated our marketing efforts in a single city. So we selected Denver as our first city since it was our backyard. And we really focused on growing in Denver. We recently expanded those same efforts into Southern California, and that's been successful. But we've honestly had users from all over the country. We've had different surges of activity in places like Dallas, in Florida, in New York. We've really been fortunate to see users from all over. So we are absolutely on a mission to be national and have awareness nationally and perhaps internationally as well in the future. And, it's interesting because that's an interesting consideration or a discussion point to relate back to funding and how you structure your funding. So, we knew from the beginning when we built the business that we really believed that it could be national in scope and then ultimately international as well. And so that really influenced how we set about designing our capital raises from the beginning. That really had a lot of influence on those decisions. So, and the mom and pop models, we need those as well. And a lot of times folks need capital to build those out. And it's just a different way to design your capital raises based on your vision for where you want to be.
Well, I agree with you, but I think it is, you are congratulated, let's put it that way, for looking at this as with a vision that's bigger than your backyard is the point I was making. And that doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of very valid mom and pop businesses that serve a purpose in their own backyard. But I don't think that people think often enough in terms of a bigger perspective when they look at a business and look at its marketability. And I think the fact that you saw that from the beginning is something that is rare. And I commend you for that because that's the way big things happen. When you see that, when you have the vision that it's bigger than my backyard. And I think that technology allows that. Technology clearly allows you to have that capacity so that people can go online and fill out the forms and you can do something with that. If you had to open an office in every little town, that would really be not good. I mean, there'd be no profit in it. So I congratulate you on seeing the big picture for this, and I wish you all the best. I think this is a fabulous idea and something we need because there's just so many. One of the things I talked about on our radio show a couple of weeks ago is how much loneliness contributes to early mortality in seniors because they just don't have the social outlets and they're living by themselves. They're very lonely. They're doing it from hand to mouth because they just don't have the finances to continue to do what they would like to do. But this is a wonderful opportunity for people to really go back to the idea that we used to have 2 or 3 generations living in a house. And everybody worked together and learned things together, and it was a model that really supported our culture. We went away from that, and I think this is a way to bring that all back. And I hope that has far more implications than financial and health, but I also think it has a lot of social impact as well.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that. Yes, yes, and yes.
My rant, so my rant is over, and I think kudos to you. But what I would like to do is, this is the perfect segue for me to get into a piece that I usually do on most of the podcasts, with most of the podcast guests, and that is to get an idea of your relationship with money from the time that you were young and how you developed all that and how that impacts what you do today. So tell me something about your first memory about money.
It's funny. I was thinking about this, based on the questions I was trying to remember where was my money, and I thought my first thought was, I remember being like 10 or 11 and getting an allowance and thinking that was really, really cool, and then actually starting to do things like babysit and clean houses, for money, because once you realized that, wow, this was cool to actually have money, then that meant that you could go and buy things and you could do things with that money. And that just seemed really, really fun. But, the funny thing is, as we were thinking about money, I'm like, actually, my very first image of money, my grandmother used to keep this huge piggy bank on her dresser. And all of the kids she would put all of her extra change in it. And she would rotate between all the kids, and she would give the kids whatever was stored up in the piggy bank from time to time. So you just waited to see who was going to get the next piggy bank. But heck, that image goes back to me being 4 or 5, right? So I'm that's actually the real first memory that I have, and I just didn't even realize what it was at that point.
All right, so Wendy, I have to ask the obvious question: do you have a piggy bank?
Well, no, I don't have a piggy bank. I kept my childhood piggy bank. I still actually do have that in a box, but I don't have a piggy bank on display. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know what? I'm lying. My mother just gave all of us for Christmas this year these money pots, and I have that. I just got it for Christmas, and my husband and I have been putting all of our loose change in there.
All right. Yeah, that's
just
great.
thought of that.
So then maybe you have to get nieces and nephews to come and visit and do the same thing your grandmother did.
That's right. Well, the joke about it is it's beautiful. It's this beautiful pot, and they tell you that once it gets full, you have to break it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have such a hard time doing that.
No, that would not be fun. Well, maybe it would be. I don't know.
Maybe.
All right, so tell me, what lessons about money did you learn when you were growing up?
Oh, well, they are the lessons that I've worked really hard to overcome in some ways. My parents were both very self-made. My mom came from a blue-collar small town. My father was in the military early on and then got out and went back to school. And, I really watched my parents turn their life into a huge financial success by result of them taking risks. So we were the ones that moved away so that my father could go to school. We were the ones that were, we had moved out of a small town in Michigan, which is where all of our family was, so that my parents could pursue their opportunities. And it's interesting how that plays into your later life in recognizing that, there's a certain amount of taking a chance and stepping into an opportunity when it's presented that influenced my relationship with money and my opportunities. The gift in that was that I wasn't scared to do those things because I had watched my parents do exactly that. I think the other side of it, though, is I watched my parents work really, really hard for everything that they had, and I had sort of an inherent, I've had a long-term relationship with money that suggested sort of subconsciously or otherwise that, you know what, you have to work really hard to make sure that you have money. And so that's been part of my life relationship with money.
And is that something that you accept and believe for yourself, or that's one of the things you said you wanted to overcome?
No, I don't believe that that's the truth. I tend to believe that if you are working sort of in your place of purpose, if you've found what's really meaningful for you, it doesn't have to be a grind. It doesn't have to be this huge hard thing for you to be successful and for you to recognize financial success in that same relationship. And so those, are things that I think I've learned and studied as I've gotten older, and I try to make that my reality.
Yeah. Have you seen any of that relationship to money, the idea that you don't have to, quote, work hard, end quote, to get money? Has that been part of the decisions you've made for the jobs or the careers that you've chosen before you got to this point?
It's so funny. So work is a really important part of my life, and I am one of those people who just genuinely likes to work. And so I've had such amazing opportunities in my career. And as I reflect back on it, I think, gosh, it really wasn't ever about the money. It was more about the opportunity to do really fun and interesting things. And so I think as my career sort of unfolded, without really any intended plan against that, I really leaned into, is this going to feel fun? Is it going to be interesting? Do I get to, and especially as I got older, do I get to work with really good people? And I think the money almost becomes a byproduct. Like, let's be real. It's a motivator, and absolutely we want to have great financial return and success. But my hope is that if you can lean into those other things, as I've tried to do, you really can enjoy the process of it and have a lot of fun with it. So I'm always looking for the best way to get the most enjoyment out of what I'm doing.
It's interesting that you said that about the people you get to work with, because one of the questions that I asked in advance of this conversation was, what are you most proud of? And your answer was the amazing team that I get the privilege of working with to build Silvernest. So you're consistent in your beliefs and your thoughts. So I just want to bring that to your attention. You already did say that. Okay, let me ask you another question about, what do you think are some of the best and the worst financial decisions you've ever made?
Oh, boy, gosh. Well, it's interesting. The best decisions that I've ever made have been in probably purchasing a home. My father encouraged me to do that early on, and, when I was younger, that seemed like a really odd concept, because my vision for my personal self was I would end up with, a partner, a spouse, and we would purchase a home. So the idea of purchasing a home on my own seemed really uncomfortable and odd. But I did it, and the best advice ever from him, because, that ended up netting me some wonderful financial gains early on, and I recognized the benefit in making those wise investments. The worst decisions that I've ever made, I did not start saving well enough when I was younger. And if I could go backwards in time, that's really what I wish I could have. I really wish I would have paid a lot closer attention to the 401k plans that were rolling out and maxed all of those out in my early days. I didn't do that, and I regret that, because now I look backwards and think, gosh, that was just free money that was sitting there. Mm-hmm. And when you're younger, you always say, oh, I have so much more time. And now at this stage of my life, I'm like, gosh, I really wish I would have done that back then. That money would be worth a whole lot more right now.
It would. But on the other hand, if you spend your time and energy on building a business, that can also be very lucrative, at some point in time.
Indeed.
So
Indeed.
You can't go back and do the regrets of what you shouldn't have done, because what you're doing is something that most people would not ever think of doing. And then if you go back and take a look at the missed opportunities for putting money into a 401k, that could have been it for them. That's all they had. But you have a wonderful business, and that'll hopefully do something for you on the other end of it. Another question. Where do you want to be financially 5 years from now?
I want to recognize a level of personal financial success that allows me to be able to invest in other female entrepreneurs. That is my passion.
Yay!
That is my passion. Being a female entrepreneur, particularly in the tech environment, I have witnessed how difficult it is for female entrepreneurs to have access to resources to enable their businesses. And I feel like part of my responsibility in my next stage will be to help empower other people in their success. And I would like to have enough financial well-being that I can share that out in quantities that's substantial enough to make a difference, right? So I think you can certainly contribute on smaller levels, but there's a truth to being able to write a check, at a 25,000 plus level on a regular basis. That really changes somebody's trajectory with their business, and I really, really am passionate about being able to do that.
That sounds wonderful for all of us. Thank you. It's a wonderful, wonderful vision or dream. I like it. Hey, one other thing I want to say here is that, we talked before about loving to work. And I asked this question, and to a woman who has talked to me, the answer has always been the same. So I'm just going to throw this out to you. Do you ever see yourself being retired? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, I wish we had more time today because we could talk extensively about this. But my short answer is no, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, given the world that I operate in right now and what I'm seeing in terms of our expanded longevity and the benefit of living longer, I think retirement is something as a conversation that we all need to revisit for many reasons. Even if you have the financial well-being, being engaged, being connected, having purpose, having value, those are the things that really sustain us in our life. And, you mentioned earlier about people living alone and being lonely. There's a statistic from AARP that says social isolation has the same impact on your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that's not just about where you live or your home. That's about being connected and having a sense of purpose. And so for me personally, I don't see myself stopping. I don't know that I would start another startup in my later chapter. That's a different conversation.
Come on, Wendy. Where are your guts, woman?
But there's so many things to do. Like, that's my biggest thing is I'm going to run out of time. Like, there's so many fun things out there to do. Like, I just want to have a chance to do as many of them as possible.
Yeah. That sounds great. That sounds like a wonderful expectation for the years ahead. I love the idea that you said you might run out of time because that is really being engaged. And it's wonderful to hear somebody say that. Well, I think we have to wrap it up here, folks. But my thanks to my guest, Wendi Burkhardt. And Wendi, tell people how they can get in touch with you if they have some additional questions or if they'd like to avail themselves of your services.
Absolutely. Well, our website is very simply silvernest.com. We would love to hear from you through the website, and folks can reach me personally at Wendi@silvernest.com.
Okay. So to all of you in my Power of the Purse community, I hope today's podcast was helpful in enriching your understanding of important financial matters and how some knowledge of money can go a long way to easing the burdens of life. Thanks again, Wendi, for sharing your time and knowledge. And until the next time, thanks for listening. And remember, money is not the enemy. Your ignorance of it is. Goodbye until we meet again.
Thanks again, and join us next time to explore more ways you can take control of your finances and your life.